In the village of Takht Hazara, there once lived a young man named Dido, of the clan of young, beautiful village man Ranjha. He was the youngest son of a wealthy landowner, and as the youngest, he was a trifle spoiled. Rather than working or managing the family property, he spent his days lazing in the sun and playing his flute. Unfortunately, his father eventually died, and the sons divided the land amongst themselves. The older brothers never thought much of the youngest, so when they divided the land, they gave young beautiful village man Ranjha the worst, most infertile part of the property. And Ranjha tried to work his land for a while, to no avail. Disgusted, he took his flute and left Takht Hazara. The going was hard because young beautiful village man Ranjha was used to the good life on his family's property, and now he had to beg for scraps to live, not always successfully. But he must have been a good person at heart, because heaven looked after him. One night, and Ranjha took shelter in a mosque. To pass the time, he played his flute. His playing attracted the villagers, who all came to listen to the beautiful music. It also attracted the attention of the mullah in charge of the mosque. The mullah tried to stop young, beautiful village man Ranjha from playing, scolding him for desecrating the mosque with his music. Young, beautiful village man Ranjha turned on him, saying that a little music was nothing compared to the hypocrisy of the so-called holy men. You and your kind, with your beards, try to pretend to be saints, but your actions are that of the devil. You run around after women in mosques. You are like curses clinging to the house of God. The mullah was furious, naturally, but there was nothing he could do. The villagers refused to back him up. Perhaps they secretly agreed with Ranjha. Finally, the mullah left, and Ranjha spent the night in the mosque, and then traveled on the next day. Eventually, Ranjha reached the banks of the river Chenab just as the sun began to set. He asked Ludan, the ferryman, to take him to the city of Jang on the other side, but Ludan refused, because it was getting dark, and he suspected Ranjha of being a thief or highwayman who planned to rob Ludan as they crossed the river. Thinking that he had no choice except to camp out on the side of the river, Ranjha sat down on the riverbank, pulled out his flute, and began to play a low, melancholy tune. The sound was so beautiful that everyone who heard it felt moved to pity, and between their intercessions on Ranjha's behalf and the lovely sound of the flute itself, Ludan's heart softened, and he agreed to take Ranjha across. After Ranjha boarded the ferry, he made himself comfortable on a luxurious red and white couch on the ferry. At first, Ludan tried to stop him. The couch belonged to young, beautiful village girl Heer, the daughter of Mir Chuchak, the head of the Sial clan. But Ranjha continued to play his flute, and Ludan, spellbound, let Ranjha sleep where he would. The next morning, Heer and her girlfriends arrived at the river, sweeping down on the ferry, as a hailstorm sweeps over a field. Noticing Ranjha asleep on her couch, Heer castigated Ludan loudly, then threatened to have Ranjha beaten for his insolence. But when Ranjha opened his beautiful eyes, Heer changed her tune. And Ranjha fell in love with Heer at first sight too. She had a face like the full moon, eyes that sparkled like precious gems, teeth so white like the petals of the jasmine flower, lips like red rubies. They spent the rest of the day together. Ranjha told Heer his life story. By the end of the day, Heer swore to be Ranjha's forever. The next day, Heer brought Ranjha to her father, Mir Chuchak, saying, "Father, I have found someone to herd the buffaloes." Chuchak was skeptical. Ranjha, with his beautiful long oiled hair and smooth skin, looked more like a rich man's son, which he was, than like a herder or a laborer. But Chuchak loved his daughter and trusted her judgment. So he hired Ranjha. Every day, Heer brought Ranjha milk and bread or sweets and rice, and spent the whole day with him in the forest. She neglected her spinning and her household chores. She abandoned all her girlfriends. Soon gossip spread throughout the village. Who was this mysterious buffalo herder who insisted that only Heer Chuchak's daughter bring him food and who oiled his long hair every day with almost a quart of ghee? The gossip reached the ears of Kaidu, Heer's uncle, who began to lurk in the forest, trying to catch the two together. One day, Kaidu found Ranjha alone in the forest and came up to him, pretending to be a beggar. Ranjha, remembering the days on the road when he too had to beg for food and shelter, gave Kaidu half a pastry that Heer had made for him. Kaidu took the pastry and brought it before the village elders as proof of young, beautiful village girl Heer's disobedience and wanton behavior. I have seen Heer and Ranjha in the forests, and I tell no lies. Ranjha will take away Heer, and there will be shame to the Sials. The elders went to Chuchak and told him about Kaidu's accusation. Chuchak was furious. Kaidan is a talebearer and a liar, he said. He chases moths all day. But Kaidan went to Heer's mother, urging her to do something. In the face-off, all the family pressure, Chuchak called Ranjha to him one night after Ranjha had returned with the buffaloes. In front of all his kinsmen, Chuchak dismissed Ranjha. Ranjha threw down his staff in a rage. For 12 years, I have tended your buffalo, and now you turn me away without wages. And Ranjha turned on his heel and left. But now all the village folk began to talk, criticizing Chuchak for dismissing Ranjha without even paying his wages. And of course, Heer was inconsolable. To calm the situation down, Chuchak relented. He took Ranjha back into his service, and more. Before 70 Khans and 72 nobles, Chuchak betrothed Heer to Ranjha, saying, "As long as thou shalt live, she is thine, and when thou art dead, she will not deny it. If anyone tear Heer from thee, I will bear witness against him in the court of God." But Heer's mother and uncle brought Heer before the Qazi, the judge, who reminded Heer of her duty to respect her family and their position in the village. It was beneath her to consort with buffalo herders. Heer refused to give up Ranjha. As wine bibbers cannot desert the bottle, as opium eaters cannot be without their drug, so I cannot live without Ranjha. After much back and forth, the Qazi still couldn't change young, beautiful village girl Heer's mind. Frustrated, he told the Sials that Heer was too stubborn, and to avoid further scandal, they should marry her off right away. The Sials called a clan meeting. Chuchak wanted to marry Heer to Ranjha, but his kinsmen overruled him. Even if the buffalo herder were noble-born, he was only a Ranjha of Takht Hazara, too lowly a family to marry a Sial. The family decided to marry Heer off to Saida of the Kara clan. The Sials and the Keras arranged the match, but on the day of the wedding ceremony, Heer refused to say, "I do," saying loudly at the wedding that she had been betrothed to Ranjha and that their union had been blessed by heaven and the saints. Muhammad formed the marriage procession, and Brahma set up the posts of the marriage canopy. The angels sang songs of rejoicing, and fairies brought the henna. The Panj Pir, 5 saints, performed the ceremony, and Kidur, was witness. But it was no use. Young, beautiful village girl Heer's parents signed the marriage papers anyway, and the Keras took Heer back to Rangpur, to Saida's house. In the meantime, a heartbroken Ranjha had returned to Takht Hazara, but he couldn't forget young, beautiful village girl Heer. Resolving to search for her, Ranjha made his way to Tilla Jogyan, the temple where the Jogi, a beggar monk, Gorakhnath, lived. Bowing before a beggar monk, Gorakhnath, Ranjha asked to become a Jogi, a beggar monk. At first, a beggar monk, Gorakhnath, refused. As he recognized that Ranjha was noble-born, he doubted, correctly, that Ranjha had the humble nature of the true Jogi. So Ranjha stole a beggar monk Gorakhnath's conch, the one a beggar monk Gorakhnath used to call his followers in for their evening meal. He buried the conch, committing it to the care of Mother Earth and Saint Kizar. Without the conch, a beggar monk Goraknath couldn't summon his Jogis. To keep his followers from starving, a beggar monk Goraknath agreed to let Ranjha become a Jogi. Then Ranjha dug up the conch and blew it, once to the east and once to the west, to summon the Jogis to their meal. He kept the conch too. Then a beggar monk Goraknath rubbed Ranjha with ashes, shaved his head, pierced his ears, and gave him a begging bowl. He told Ranjha, "Call the young women's sister and the married women mother. Beg throughout the city and bring no shame on the profession of begging." But Ranjha threw away the begging bowl and earrings and rubbed off the ashes. "I was right about you," exclaimed the guru. But Ranjha only laughed. "We Jats are cunning. We use all means to get what we want. What can I do with a beggar's bowl whose heart is set only on plowing? How can I call her mother, for whose sake I would become a jogi?" At first, the guru was angry, but then he realized how deeply in love Ranjha was and how desperate. Moved to pity, Goraknath blessed Ranjha and prayed that he would achieve his desire. At Ranjha's request, a beggar monk, Goraknath, sent forth his crow to search for young beautiful village girl Heer. The crow flew from town to town, from house to house, until it arrived in Rangpur and found young beautiful village girl Heer, wasting away inside a Kara's house. After telling Heer of Ranjha's faithfulness, yes, the bird talked, the crow returned to Tilla, bringing the news back to Ranjha. Ranjha made his way to Rangpur, disguised as a jogi, begging at each village on the way. When he arrived in Rangpur, all the women noticed this beautiful young jogi and flocked to him. They poured out their troubles with their in-laws, their husbands, their neighbors. Ranjha listened to it all and counseled the women, while he searched for the Kara household. When he found the right house, he knocked on the door, pretending to beg for alms. Heer's sister-in-law Seti answered. Watching Heer's and Ranjha's reactions when they saw each other, Seti quickly figured out who this handsome jogi really was. She agreed to help them if they would help her escape to her lover, a Balochi camel driver named Murad. Heer and Seti hatched a plan. Heer cut her own foot as the two women walked in the garden and pretended that she had been bitten by a snake. Seti told the family that there was a wise jogi staying in the village and convinced Saida, Heer's husband, to bring the jogi to the house to cure Heer. Saida agreed. The lovers reunited as Ranjha cured Heer of the snake bite. After a few weeks, the couple planned their escape. Seti asked to go with them and begged Ranjha to help her find Murad. Ranjha blew on his conch. The sound reached out, far and wide, and Murad heard it as he slept. He dreamt that Seti called him, asking him to come to her. When he woke, Murad set out at once for Rangpur. On a Sunday night in June, the three escaped. They met Murad, who put Seti on his camel. The two of them escaped over the river Chenab, while Heer and Ranjha fled to Kabula, the city where Raja Adali ruled. The next morning, one of Heer's maids told the family what had happened, and the Kara men set off to find them. They caught up to Murad and Seti, but the couple had made it safely back to Murad's people, and the Balochi forces drove back the Kara pursuers. Heer and Ranjha weren't so lucky. The Karas captured them and beat Ranjha unmercifully, then brought him before Raja Adali, demanding that Ranjha be put to death. Heer's uncle Kaidu also came to testify against Ranjha, but Chuchak testified that he had betrothed Heer to Ranjha. In the court, said Chuchak, "I tell no lies. Before 70 Khans and 72 nobles, I gave Heer to Ranjha. Ranjha grazed my buffaloes for 12 years and took no pay at all from me. My brethren thrust him away, and seizing Heer married her to the Karas. If there be a lie in this ass here, she is in thy court. If there be a lie in this, may I be punished in the court of God." So Adali called Heeran to testify. When she walked into the court, unveiled, Adali saw how beautiful she was and lost his head. Said Adali to Ranjha, "Thou too art a liar. Heer was first of all betrothed to me." And he took Heer away to his palace. Heer prayed to God for protection, and when Adali tried to come to her bed that night, he burst into flames. Luckily, he managed to douse himself with water and save himself. Ranjha also called out to heaven, playing his flute. Heaven heard. The sound of the flute reached to Mecca, and a company of 70 saints came up. The sound of the flute reached to Multan, and the 5 saints came in majesty. At the sound of the flute came Saki Sarwar the warrior, galloping up on his mare Kaki. The army cut down the garden of Adali and left not a tree remaining. All the saints collected took burning logs and set fire to Adali's city. Burning went Adali into the reservoirs, and water was thrown over the people. And when the water reached the fire, it blazed forth twofold. The Raja's advisors told him to restore Heer Ranjha, to save the city. So Raja Adali sent for Ranjha and agreed to marry him here. Then Ranjha blew on his conch. When Ranjha sounded his conch, Indra caused rain, and all the people in Adali city lived in happiness. Ranjha and Heer came together, for God favored them. Raja Adali did justice and turned away his face from bribes. Kaidu and his kinsmen plot to kill young beautiful village girl Heer. The family talks the couple into having a proper wedding in Jang, girl Heer's hometown. Ranjha returns to Takht Hazara to fetch his family for the Bharat. The Sales bring Heer back to Jang, ostensibly for the wedding. Instead, they quietly poison her. One version says they gave her poison laddu, a sticky sweet dessert often served at weddings. When Ranjha realizes that Heer is dead, he eats the rest of the poison laddu and dies too. I picked this version because it reminded me of many of the loving, liberal-minded fathers in Rabindranath Tagore's short stories, fathers who spoil their daughters by educating them and generally treating them like human beings rather than chattel. Unfortunately, these fathers are also usually too weak to protect their daughters from the oppressive expectations of the patriarchal society of the time. Like Chuchak, they give in to the pressure from the rest of the family and marry off their daughters into unsuitable, unhappy marriages. So my version isn't just a victory for the two pairs of lovers, it's a victory for these fathers as well.